So hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dr. Sally Gales. I work with the Learning Development Center, and welcome to Wednesday Workshops. So I am going to be talking about writing for your audience, and I am not meaning to share that, but I am meaning to share, one second, writing for your audience, my PowerPoint. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this, no problem. If there is a problem, please let me know and put it in the chat. But we're talking about writing for your audience. And so I have a warm-up exercise, and there is a QR code on the screen that will take you to a Padlet. Now, this is for anyone watching, a really kind of fun, very easy exercise that will help really make it clear what people are talking about when they say that your writing has a voice. So the exercise would be to write 3 sentences. And the sentence, the topic of each sentence, is explaining to someone who has never seen a dog, what is a dog? So, right, you could talk about different dog breeds. You could talk about it's an animal that has 4 legs and a fluffy head and tail. It doesn't matter, right? That's not really the focus of this, but that's just the topic. But each sentence is being addressed to a different audience. So in sentence 1, you'd be talking to your best friend. So how would you explain dog to your best friend? Sentence 2 is being addressed to an academic researcher who is a lead in their field, someone you want to impress. And sentence number 3 is your grandfather or your grandmother, okay? So if you go through this, there's room on the Padlet for you to add your sentences. Again, they can be really fun to kind of see, but the idea behind this is that even though the topic is the same, in each of these sentences, you are essentially just describing a dog. Each of these sentences should be very fundamentally different. Why is that? The reason for this is because each of these sentences is being targeted at a very different audience. And so we need to be in control of the way of the voice that we present, our written voice, so that it is appropriate for our audience. So who is your audience? When you know who your audience is, it's whoever is going to read your writing. You will know how to structure your work, what kind of language you should use, formal, informal. Should you use kind of colloquial slang? Should you use contractions, can't, won't, haven't? Or should you be a bit more kind of elevated and say have not, cannot? You'll know what type of information you should include. If you're trying to explain something to a grandparent, you will probably know, not always, but certain things will need to be reduced in their complexity so that this person can understand it, as opposed to explaining something to somebody already in your field. You can just already know that you can skip the introductory bit and go straight into the main meat of the topic. Knowing your audience will also help you learn how to approach the topic. So for example, let's say you are writing a blog, okay? So this is for social consumption. It is for everyone. You're going to want to make sure that you explain any key words or any topics, and you also want to make sure that it's approachable and that your audience will enjoy it. On the other hand, if you're going to be writing an academic paper or an academic report for your tutor, you're going to want to make sure that you're showing expertise in this particular topic. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But when you're writing your paper, you're probably thinking, well, I know who my audience is. My audience is my tutor, my program leader, whoever it is who assigned you the paper that you are being asked to write. And you are correct. That is your primary audience. But this audience, if you think about it in terms of just your tutor, you might make the assumption that they already know everything. They know more than you do. Therefore, you don't need to explain every tiny thing. You don't need to go into great detail because they already know it. So it's fine to kind of skip past it. The problem with this is what happens is when your tutor or your program leader actually reads the paper, they don't know that you are assuming they know it. All they are seeing is gaps in your paper, is gaps in your writing. And so they might think they don't know, they don't understand, they didn't do the assignment. So it can be a bit dangerous to think of your program leader as your audience, because we just get that in like, oh, well, they know it, it'll be fine. A better, perhaps, alternative would be write to your peers, write to your fellow students. You're all at the same or similar levels, so you will need to explain concepts and key ideas to your student, your fellow peers, but you'll also be able to kind of speak in a way that you wouldn't speak to someone who is not in your field, or to someone who's still in secondary school, for example, right? So using your peer group as the audience can help you envision your group and write to your group in a way that your tutor is going to turn around and say, wow, they explained it so clearly and so simply, and this is exactly what I was looking for. So uninformed audience can be a bit more helpful than a really informed audience. When we talk about writing for your audience, and I did say, right, your tutor will think, oh, simple and clear, perfect. A common misconception among university students is that you need to write like a university student. And what does that mean? That means that you need long sentences and you need big words and you need to sound impressive and quote unquote smart. This is not true, because usually what that does, if you try to mimic a certain style, is a lot of students might hide behind that style, because then they have all these big words and these complicated sentences, and then that's okay. I don't have to sit and kind of really think about what I'm actually trying to say. Writing something clearly and simply is much, much, much harder than writing complex sentences that don't mean anything. So you want to think about using plain language. Now, plain language doesn't mean you're dumbing it down. It doesn't mean that you are condescending your reader or that we are condescending you as students. It just means that the academic texts you might have read that are complex, that are using a bit more of an elevated vocabulary, those authors have spent years developing their craft to write in that style. Your tutors do not expect you to learn that overnight. That'd be very unrealistic and unfair of them to do. So they are not worried about you copying a certain style. They are worried, can you convey your ideas? And are your ideas supported? And is your structure clear? Right? These are the things that your tutor is looking for. So plain language is just using language that your audience will understand. This means you are, again, writing for your peers, right? We're taking out the tutor. If you're writing for your university peers, you're not using dumb language. You're not using overly simple language. You are using a certain level of language, because all of you who are in the university, you have a clear background of education behind you, and you are using this language to explain a certain concept, right? You want to make sure that the level of information you are providing is appropriate. You're not expected to write in jargon. And so in jargon is essentially words that are not understood by many. If you do need to include any sort of key technical terms, explain what they are, because you want to assume maybe the people in your class haven't come across this term yet. Teach them, inform them. That's what your writing is trying to do. Teach, inform, convince, and persuade. Make sure that you focus on what they want to know. So for you, as a university student, you have been giving a cheat code in a way, and that is the assignment that you are provided. On this assignment, your program leader and your tutor will lay out all the things that they are looking for. It is a really great place to start to kind of pull from that assignment into individual sections. These are the things I need to make sure I cover. What do I know about these things? Go ahead, start adding, start populating a document. With each section, what do you know? What do you need to find out? Add another column. Okay, these are the things I don't quite know yet, but I know I should know. So I'm going to go ahead and do some more research. You've done some research. Now you can start adding that, right? So all of a sudden, these just arbitrary or seemingly arbitrary 5 key points that your tutor is going to mark this written assignment on has created and developed, and now you're going to have an outline by which to create an essay or a paper. In terms of guiding them through the information, you want to think about who your audience is. So we did say that your peers would be your audience, and that's absolutely fine. Think about once you have kind of, okay, I know exactly what I have for my assignment. These are the key things I need to make sure I absolutely have in my written document. I cannot express it enough. Make sure, print it out, put it on the desk beside you. Always refer back to those key things that you've been asked to provide, because that's a good way to make sure that you're on track and that you're going to be graded for what they asked for, which means you're going to be getting good grades. But once you have that, once you have the assignment and you know what your assignment is looking for, think about what does your audience need. So if you are being asked to write something in cybersecurity, is there a terminology or is there context that you need to provide your audience before you get to the actual assignment key points so that they understand it, right? Think about what's important or what's valuable. Now, this might be more relevant when you go into the workforce and you have to write a report to an investor or to an employer. What is it that they are looking for? What are they least likely to care about? Is it, if we're talking about university writing, anything extraneous to the actual assignment is what they're not going to care about. It doesn't matter what a good idea is. It doesn't matter how well written it is. If it's not the assignment, I'm sorry, you're not going to get the grade that you deserve. So make sure that you stay on task. Other things that you might think about is what are they going to, what kind of tone are you going to take? What do you have to say? And it's always important to keep in mind, what do you have to say, especially at the university, because you're not just being asked to report on something, so just repeat what someone else has said. You're being asked to, you have this information. What is your idea that has come of this information? But how much should you explain? Really? I mean, how much should you explain? This is hard. There's no one like, okay, 5% of your report should always be context and explanation. You want to show your tutor that you know your material, okay? So there is some explanation. There is some repetition that needs to occur. When you want to think about what you need to explain, look and see the assignment. Maybe that'll give you a hint, because if your assignment tells you that they want you to report or summarize, then that means that actually most of your written work is repetition. You are being asked to tell your tutor what already exists. At the university, not a lot of that is actually there, okay? So at the university, you're going to have less summarize, more analyze. So this means that you are being asked to read what it is and then interpret it. Come up with your own ideas, come up with your own proposals, and use the reading to kind of help back it up, to start creating support for your ideas. So we're looking more at the argument and less at the repetition, but you'll still have some reporting, some explaining. And so this reporting and explaining can be, you quote a source to back up an idea. Or maybe it's in the introduction where you give us some generalized context on your topic. You're just going to be right? We're telling us what already exists before analyzing and coming up with your own ideas. So there is some explanation in all written text at the university. It's just shouldn't be all written and explained. Once you've written something, once you have something down, you want to find a beta reader. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the idea of a beta reader is a friend, a classmate, perhaps someone at the LDC who can, Learning Development Center, who can go ahead and read pieces of your work, or if you find a very good friend who's willing to read the whole work, great, then they'll read the whole work. And it's a rough draft, and so it's not meant to be perfect. What you're asking them to do is you're asking them to tell you, where are you unclear? Where are things not making sense? And you are going to find usually 3 options for how beta readers are going to respond. The first option is your reader is going to have a lot of questions, okay? They're going to ask, so let's say you are being asked to write about piranhas. Okay, piranhas. Yeah. And so their questions are, what is a piranha? Why do I need to know about them? How would I identify one? These are pretty critical questions that should have been clear in your writing. So if your reader has a lot of questions for you, and they are basic questions that should have been understood, that means that you're actually not explaining enough. So you need to go back and add in a few more details, elaborate ever so slightly more to make sure that the reader doesn't come away with those questions. If your reader comes away not with questions about what is it, but they're more asking, it's not quite clear. I get what a piranha is, but are there piranhas in the locks? I mean, that's a silly question. Of course they're not. But that's a problem that they're asking that. That means that you did explain, but maybe there's just a word or a phrase that is missing to make that explanation more specific and thus more clear. So you want to give examples. You want to go ahead and quote things so that you make sure that they've got the basics. Did they get now the rest of it? The last sort of kind of potential reaction from a beta reader is that when they read it, perhaps they yawn, they look a little bit bored. And I mean, I know the topics can be a bit dry, so we're not going to talk really about that. But really, they come back knowing too much. Okay, they know so many details, right? So they tell us, okay, piranhas live in the water. Piranhas are carnivores. Piranhas live in South America. Piranhas are essential to the ecosystem. And they give you fact and fact and fact and fact. But then they ask, wait, are they important? Or I'm not really sure why you wrote this paper. That means now that you actually have too much detail, so much explanation in detail that your main driver, the main point you were trying to make with this paper has gotten lost. So when they have all these kind of random facts that they can shoot back at you, but they're missing, they don't tell you, they don't verbalize that key main point, you need to go back and look through and pare it back. You might want to restructure it because maybe you do have sufficient enough of explanation, but you just want to kind of pull it back a little bit so that it's only the essential information is being provided. Your word choice and your tone are going to impact your reader's experience. In academic reports and in reports in the business world, you are 100% expected to provide and write in a formal tone. One example of being formal is that you do not use contractions. So you say do not and not don't, right? Another example of formal language is that you write without using slang or colloquialisms. You write in a way that would not be the way that you speak to your best friend. The way that you speak to your best friend in day-to-day language, that's informal. You want to think about the way that you address someone you respect, the way that you address someone who you want to respect you. That's the tone that you want. You're trying to impress someone. You're trying to impress your tutor. You're trying to impress that future employer. So you want to make sure it matters. Your writing matters. So take the time to carefully craft it. The last point here is the idea of seeing the forest through the trees. Now there is this saying, this metaphor of being able to see the forest through the trees. Now, what does this mean? If we think about it, I'll break it down because I know that this isn't something that's available everywhere. If you're standing in the middle of a forest, what do you see around you? You see trees. What you don't see is the entirety of the forest. It's impossible, right? If forests are very large, you only can see what's directly in front of you, and usually what's directly in front of you is exactly trees. So what you want to be able to do with your writing is that, yes, they see the trees, they see the details, they see the individual points that you are trying to make, but they do not lose track of the bigger picture, okay, the forest, if you will. They do not lose track of the main point that you are trying to make. And it is a fine balance. And the way that you achieve this balance is you make sure that your main point is clear at the start, at your introduction, and every single detail, every paragraph, everything that comes after should always be in service, should always be supporting that main point. So even if I'm in paragraph 15 and it's a really good paragraph with really good points, I know because you make it clear to me that, yep, it's going back to that main point. It's all going back to the main point. We're going to talk about drafting because if no one has told you this, I need to be the one to tell you this. You cannot write your best written work one time with one draft, okay? And I will admit, because I am nothing if not honest, that when I was in your shoes, when I was doing my bachelor's and I was at university, I 100% wrote one draft, turned it in, and hey, I did fine. I got A's, okay? I mean, I'm decided to follow writing for my career, so yay, maybe I have a little bit of skill. But looking back, I thought, I don't need to redraft this. I don't need to edit this. My writing is just so good. Wrong. I was so wrong. I was young. It's okay. And you're all young, so that makes sense. That's fine. But it's just fact. Your first draft is not supposed to be your last draft. Your first draft, the only thing that your first draft should accomplish is getting your ideas on a piece of paper or on a Word document. That's it. It is through editing and drafting that is where your writing actually becomes good. That's where you actually make something that is worth being proud of. Now, each draft, every time you go, draft 2, draft 3, draft 4, you're not rewriting the whole thing from scratch. Excuse me. You're not rewriting the whole thing from scratch. What you're doing is you're focusing on one element, fixing that element, and then moving on. And so for this, you want to start big, right? So when you write your first draft, you want to think, okay, structure. Does my structure make sense? Are all my points in logical order? Okay, you shift some things. Then the next one, do I have enough support? Am I giving enough support for my ideas? Look through it. And slowly but steadily, then you get down to like punctuation and grammar and that sort of thing. So we start big and we start small. When you are drafting, one of these elements that you are looking for is your voice. Your voice. Are you connecting to your reader? And a way to do this is to think about, not read it as if you know it, which you will know your writing inside and out because you've spent time doing it. You want to try to think about it from a reader's position. So essentially, you're trying to read it as if you have no previous knowledge of this material. And you want to ask yourself, have I explained this enough? Are my connections clear? Is this easy to understand? Does this make sense where this is coming? Or actually, should this come later? This is hard to do. This is going to be a skill that you need to develop with a bit of time and a bit of practice. But you can ask for help, right? You can ask people to read a paragraph or two, like we said, with your beta readers, but you really want to be able to start doing it on your own. So do start practicing it. Do start thinking about it from an outsider's point of view. And a key way to start doing this is by taking a break, okay? So remember when I said I would write my essays in the past and I'd just turn them in and it'd be great? A big reason I did that is because I waited until the absolute last minute to write the essay and then I turned it in. Shame on me, bad habit. Don't learn by my mistakes. Be better, okay? What you want to make sure you do is you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to write a draft and then put it away. Maybe take a day off. The reason that I suggest, and it's not just me, many people suggest, that you give yourself that break between when you wrote something and when you try to edit something is because when you write something, it's precious to you. You've spent a lot of time working on it. You are going to feel connected to it and like you want it to, you don't want to fix it. You don't want to delete that sentence. That sentence is just so good. You need to give yourself a little bit of time away so that you can separate your personal feelings and look at it objectively. Look at it with that fresh eye of, oh, I've never read this before. What do I think about it? So a break is critical to that. Another thing that you might try when you're editing is outlining. Now, we all talk about outlining before you start writing, and outlining before you writing is a really good step because it can really save you a lot of time, but you can outline after you write. So what you're going to do if you're going to outline after you write is you're going to take your draft, you're going to take your paper, your report, and look at each and every paragraph separately. Write down the main point for each paragraph on a separate sheet of paper, right, in order, one after the other. Now, take a look at your new outline, right, this outline of main ideas. Does it make sense, the logic that you've put it in? Did you have a hard time reducing certain paragraphs to one main point? If that's true, that means that your paragraph needs to be split up, which is great. That's fine. Do it. Split it up so that it's clear because every paragraph should only have one main point. And the last tip for drafting is reading your paper or your work out loud. A lot of people, I have friends who cringe at this. They do not like this idea. They do not want to read. They don't like the sound of their voice. They don't want to do it. I obviously talk a lot when I'm teaching, so I'm very used to the sound of my voice. But that being said, when you read silently, so when you read in your mind, you are not reading, you are skimming. You are skipping over words. You are skipping over things that you're like, I already know this. When you read your paper out loud, you are being forced to slow down and read every single word. Thus, you are going to suddenly hear the kind of rhythm of your sentences. You're going to hear the tone and the voice that you have written in. You're going to definitely hear any mistakes that you might have missed. And you're going to be able to see or hear things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. These techniques can really help you in the revision process, so I do encourage you to try some, if not all of them. And for our last slide, with our audience always being at the center of your mind in terms of your written communication, it is important to think about different things such as diversity. So it is much easier to write for a specific group of like a specific narrow group. Why? Because they'll have similar background knowledge, they'll have similar education level, they'll have similar sayings or colloquialisms, they'll have a similar way of speaking. But if you are trying to reach a broad audience with different backgrounds, different knowledge, and different, we'll just stop at that, then you are now presented with a larger challenge. And if you are going to spend your time writing something at the university, I know you're writing it for your peers, but we can assume that you want it to be read and as accessible and widespread as possible, because otherwise, why'd you write it? For one person, that seems fine if that's what you really want, but really you want to make sure your writing reaches far distances. So you want to make sure that, again, you are using English that is accessible by all. You're avoiding those colloquial sayings that maybe you know, but someone from another country doesn't know. You want to make sure that you are explaining anything that is not common knowledge to your field. So these include words, phrases, processes, right? All of these things. If they are not common in every day, provide a small explanation. Another thing that you want to think about is the level of knowledge that your audience is approaching your written paper with. You don't want to overestimate. You don't want to underestimate what they know. So you want to provide just enough information so that they are challenged in a good way, challenged by your ideas, not challenged by your writing. In terms of the scope and the interest, you want to think about the way that you're organizing your report. So are you signposting it? Are you providing headings and subheadings? Is the structure logical? Is it easily accessible to someone if at a glance? When we talk about the idea of register, this is the kind of the way that we use our language so that we can be formal or informal. And so we just want to make sure that at the university we are always using formal language unless it's specifically stated. You're not going to really use personal pronouns, so I, me, we, you. You'll most of the time be speaking in third person. And that's it. So the last exercise that, again, you can add it to the Padlet if you're interested. It's always good to see different examples, is kind of bringing it all together. So it would be, while the first one was writing 3 different sentences, this is a sentence or 2 telling us why your field of study is important. And it should be written with a specific audience in mind. And I would like you to go ahead and put the audience in brackets. So if you go to the Padlet, you'll see that I have an example. And the example just says creative writing is important because creative writing was my background, by the way, or is. Creative writing is important because it not only teaches us empathy from a biological standpoint, it allowed us to survive and evolve based on reenactments of hypothetical situations. And I propose that this kind of sentence would be something that is more academic based, so a bit more formal. That is it for me. So this is our contact details. We are available. We have another Wednesday workshop after this one with Jim, and we have appointments if you'd like to make any appointments to go over any work that you have. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Does anyone here? Oh, I'm also going to stop recording. So thank you everyone who joined on the recording. But